Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to assemble a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world one character at a time. And it all starts with one thing, a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. To gain that understanding, I am mining the intersection of psychology, theology, and philosophy to make you a better writer. This is episode 43, Naming Your Traits, the Resilience Traits. We've been working with character traits where we created little stories about character traits for ourselves or for character, and we logged them on a 4x6 file card. They were very short stories that could fit on one file card. When we created the stories, we said, don't worry about the name. We'll get the names later, which is what we're doing right now. But we've already taken a few days to work towards getting the names for our stories. We began by choosing what character trait group our story belonged to. And the story belongs to one of these groups based on what the story deals with. If the challenge for our character is the external physical world as opposed to people, then we say it's a resilience in the resilience group. And we wrote resilience at the top of the card. If the trait had to do with managing ourselves and our own behavior, or our character's own behavior, then we wrote balance at the top of the card because it would belong to the balance group. We wrote insight if the situation involved judgment and the ability to correctly assess circumstances and come to a correct conclusion. Finally, we wrote empathy on the card if it had to do with navigating relationships. And I contended for you that all of your stories, each one of them would fall into one of these 4 categories, and to please message me in the comments if you think you have a story that doesn't fit one of those classifications. Well, then, yesterday, we broke them down some more, and we're going to review the breakdown we gave to the resilience character traits. We said that the resilience character traits could be broken into 2 subgroups. One subgroup we called the courage subgroup, and that had to do with when you or your character was facing the physical world, where the physical world was a big challenge. The other subgroup had to do with the character or you facing the physical world, but where you're coming out on top, or the character's coming out on top in a position of power. Well, tonight we're going to focus in on just on the resilience group, and we are going to take those 2 subgroups, courage and power, and we're going to break it down all the way to actually naming the character's trait that's involved in the story, where we labeled it resilience, and then yesterday said it was resilience courage or resilience power. So now we're going to begin with resilience courage. So shuffle through your stories and find any story where you've already written on the card resilience courage, because now we're ready to actually name the character trait that your story connects to. Okay, within the courage subgroup, there are 3 character traits. And again, we're going to break them into one of the 3 based on what the story deals with. If the challenge in the story is enduring tedium, boredom, the very endlessness of the task ahead, the sameness of the day-to-day, the struggle of the alarm went off again, got to get up and go to work again, that just having to deal with just things are always the same, then we are dealing with the character trait of constancy. That story is about constancy. Well, perhaps that's not the case. Perhaps the challenge with the outside world is one where we have to face, or the character has to face, something really tough. You're trying to get to the other side of a deep ravine or a roaring river, or standing up in front of a crowd and making a speech, or anything that's a tough challenge that's right in front of you, and you can't make progress unless you get past that barrier or that obstacle or that challenge. And that, we will say, is the character trait called perseverance. Do you see how perseverance differs from constancy? Constancy might not even be all that scary or dangerous. It's just that it just feels like it's never going to end. When am I going to be done with this? Whereas perseverance, the challenge in and of itself, can be very scary, maybe even life-threatening. And last but not least in this group, if the story has to do about enduring suffering, then the character trait is patience. And you can see that enduring suffering is very much in the now. It's very much in the moment. You could have your character dealing with a situation where the big story is constancy, the thing he has to do day after day after day, but the problem of the moment might be patience. He gets enduring the fact that there's never enough hot water to get all the way through a shower, and it's just miserable. Or he could be dealing with a character trait of perseverance, meeting a tough challenge, and that's the big story. But at the moment, the patience might be going through thorns and brambles to get through this tough barrier. So the patience can end up being mixed in with perseverance and constancy, but patience has to do with the sufferings of the moment. Also, patience may not have anything to do with there being any kind of a challenge ahead. Maybe patience is just enduring a very unpleasant task that you just happen to have to do at this moment. Your child gets sick and you got to clean it up. That's suffering of that, having to deal with that issue of the moment. So that also belongs to the resilience group. The character trait is patience. Now let's look at the other side of that big divide when we broke resilience into two subgroups. Now we're looking at the subgroup of power. You on top of the world, or your character on top of the world. We have two character traits in this area. The first character trait is magnificence. Magnificence is all about doing something great. The interesting thing about magnificence is that there is something within all of us that is continually calling us to be the best and greatest that we can be. But if we do not have resilience, we can tamper it down and say, no, I don't want to face that. I don't want to try to be great. So we end up pushing as much power against the magnificent to hold it down as it would be if you let it go for it to spring forth and blossom. So magnificence is doing something great, achieving your greatness. Of course, this is very abbreviated. We could easily spend hours just talking about magnificence. But there is another character trait that goes along with magnificence, and it's magnanimity. Not a word we use a whole lot, but magnanimity has the very important job of managing magnificence. If you will, magnanimity is like the conscience of magnificence. In its simplest form, magnanimity is about sharing the glory and sharing credit where credit is due. In that regard, magnanimity can exist independent of magnificence, or can exist when magnificence in all its splendor is actually not so giant that the rest of the world would even notice, but it's still magnanimity, still magnificence. Magnanimity's job is to keep magnificence on track, to keep magnificence being going to the good, using good means, achieving good goals, and sharing the credit all the way along. So now, whichever your story was, if your outer group was resilience, you now know the character trait that goes on your story. So add that name to the top of the card, and tomorrow we'll work on the next character trait group, breaking those all the way down to the character trait names. For now, bye-bye. See you tomorrow.